And we are now recording. So thank you very much indeed, everyone, for joining us for today's Learning Live digital session, where we're going to be looking at building an organizational learning culture. And we're joined by two guests today. You can see them both. They both put their cameras on up on the screen now. We have two guests. Our first guest is Nathan Konstantino. And Nathan is the sales director at 𝘄𝗶𝗿𝗶 and heads up all customer activity from onboarding to managing customers. Nathan has a long career in client-facing roles across support services, manufacturing, talent, and learning and development. And our second guest today is Craig Hamill. Craig is Digital and Innovation Learning Lead at the Direct Line Group, and his L&D experience spans over 20 years, with a wide depth of experience in the market across multiple organizations. This brings a great variation and perceptions into what it means to continually encouraging the all-important learning culture in the day-to-day of work. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. I will stop sharing my screen and I will hand over the virtual microphone to you, Nathan. Thank you for joining us both.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you very much for pronouncing my surname correctly. It's tripped many a person up over the years, so thank you very much. Hi, hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I did hear in the intro there that we've got a few guests or listeners from across the pond, so good morning to you, and welcome. Welcome to this webinar where Craig and I are going to have a chat, I guess, and hopefully you're going to learn a little bit from that. You might take a few things away, hopefully back into your world of work, your organizations, and we're going to kind of make it a little bit interactive with a few polls along the way. So you'll be pleased to know that no slides, none of that nonsense, just good chat and really kind of picking Craig's brain. So as Michael said, I'm Nathan. I head up sales here at 𝘄𝗶𝗿𝗶. So my background is very much across a few industries, talent, manufacturing, built environment. I head up the commercial activity here at 𝘄𝗶𝗿𝗶. So really that's supporting new customers, looking after existing customers, working with partners, whether that be partners like LPI and doing things like this, webinars, podcasts, attending events, or partners that actually take what we do as an organization into other markets. Tiny little bit about 𝘄𝗶𝗿, and then we're going to get into the fun stuff. So I guess 𝘄𝗶𝗿 started 𝘄𝗶learning as about 5 years ago, and I mentioned there that we help the industry become better from a partnership perspective. But when we talk about better, we're talking specifically, and the nub around the reason why the organization started is we feel that learning doesn't have to be boring, and it doesn't have to be the same. It doesn't have to be dull. It doesn't have to be grey. So we should all want to learn, right? And we should want to learn, whether that be at home or at work. So our goal as an organisation is dead simple. It's really simple. It's making learning fun. And we do that through the power of animation and storytelling. Now, in a couple of minutes, you're going to hear from one of the very best storytellers that I've got to know in recent times, and that is Craig. So Craig, enough from me, because the 110 people we've got on the call are really here to listen to you. So over to you, and if you wouldn't mind just telling the audience a little bit about yourself and who you are, please.
It's very kind of you, Nathan, and thank you for having me on to talk to you today. And when Michael was doing my bio, I was kind of basically saying I could probably summarize that to this is someone who's been around the block. Much more memorable. So thank you so much for having me on. I am so passionate about learning and development. As Michael had said at the beginning, I've been in the industry for over 20 years now. remit has covered a number of different roles, from working as a L&D practitioner in a very small organisation where I basically had carte blanche, a blank piece of paper. It was a family-run business, and it was kind of like, hey, the world is your oyster. I was like, okay. Then it was a case of, oh, we haven't got much budget, so do what you can. And I was within that organisation for about 15 years, and until unfortunately COVID hit, and yeah, I was a casualty of that in respect of my career. So I was then kind of like, what do I do? I then went into the world of customer success and was an enterprise customer success manager. So some people would say going on to the vendor side is the dark side, but actually I saw it as part of my career as a real opportunity to kind of almost act as a bit of a consultant to a lot of the clients I was working with, and that gave me great insight into small organizations right up the way to sort of 50,000 size organizations. And then went into a bit of consultancy. I dipped my toe into that water in a previous life, and then actually came full circle and came back to the thing that I really love the most, which is practitioner. But actually this time around, being part of obviously a learning experiences team within Direct Line Group, but actually really focusing on a specialism, which is a really exciting place to be at the moment, which is obviously digital learning. Hence the one of my long titles, which is Digital and Innovation Lead at Direct Line Group. And then I suppose for anybody, because obviously we've got global representation on the call, anybody who has not heard of Direct Line before, we're UK-based insurance company. We offer a portfolio of insurance products and services, and that ranges from, you know, car, home, pet, travel, life, landlord. We also offer breakdown services, and we also have what's called auto repair car centres across the UK. And there may be some brands that you will have heard of, which is Direct Line, 𝘄𝗶𝗁𝗶𝗵, Darwin, Green Flag, and obviously legal services. And I've been there for 6 months now, and it's a really exciting opportunity. So hopefully with the experience that I've had over those number of years, I can lean into this conversation with great passion.
Brilliant. What an intro. Yeah, I never knew about the family business bit, actually. So that's quite an interesting bit that we might just delve into a little bit later, having kind of grown up in a family business, Craig, but also worked in a few startups over the years. So different kind of environment, right?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Right. So what are we here to talk to you about today? So as Michael and Craig and myself have alluded to, fundamentally, we're here today to talk about culture. Okay, and culture takes many guises. Okay, and specifically, we're talking about learning culture, and we're talking about building a learning culture in an organization, whether that be small, okay, large, growing organization, and actually strategies for success, and how some of those strategies can hopefully be deployed, executed, and hopefully drive positive change, results, performance in an organization. Some of the key areas that we're going to talk about, just kind of dipping our toe in a little bit, is, yeah, creating an environment where people feel safe, they feel actually supported, they feel that they're part of an organization and learning culture, because that's not often seen, is it, in a business? So, you know, how do you create that? How do you kind of generate it? We'll be looking at things like growth mindset. Hear about it all the time, right? You read about it all the time, but how do you actually kind of bubble that to the surface? And how does that actually lead to increased dedication from an employee or performance? And how does it impact really the performance not only of the person, but the performance of the organization? Because for me, those things go hand in hand. Okay, great. Right, what we're going to do first, please, and I'm going to give Michael the nod if I can, please, Michael. We're going to jump into a poll, okay? And we want to try and make this as interactive as possible. So where you've got questions, jump in. So if you wouldn't mind just answering that there, which is, how would you describe your organization's current learning culture. Okay, developed and performing, you can all see it on screen. Maybe it's developed and underperforming. Okay, in build with lots of ideas, but kind of nothing in play at the moment. So very much, yeah, research, strategy builds, or I was going to say, hopefully no one's clicked on that bottom one, but a couple have, Craig. So maybe we can help them there. Is, hey, what's learning culture? So I guess without further ado,
should I end that poll, Nathan, and look to share the results? Because obviously you, myself, and Craig can see the results, and there's one fairly clear winner there, isn't there? Shall I end the poll and then share the results with the assembled group?
Perfect. Thank you, Michael.
Let's just end that poll, and hopefully now you should be able to see the results on the screen. What are your thoughts, guys, from the results that we've had from the delegates today?
Well, clear winner in terms of in build with lots of ideas. So, Craig, I guess over to you really in terms of how would you describe the current organizational culture within Direct Line Group, and then what would you say people should consider when starting on that journey?
Yeah, it's always an interesting one, right? Because if you think back to where I said at the beginning, like my career started off in an organization where it was a blank piece of paper, like the business didn't know what they didn't know. So I obviously was in a fortunate position to be able to define at that point what a learning culture meant, and what kind of journey I wanted to go on, versus the type of person that then comes into an organization, I suppose, like I am at Direct Line, where really my role is part of a bigger picture. My role specifically in the learning experiences team is about how we support our colleagues in kind of delivering performance, how we think about careers, better outcomes, with skills basically at the center of everything that we do. And the way in which we want to do that is through sort of creating immersive learning experiences, but also at the forefront of everything is then enabling a sort of a culture where we can foster continuous learning and innovation. And it'd be interesting actually for people to start using chat, if you can, around where you actually scored yourself and the reasons behind that, because there are so many elements that make up actually what the definition is of a learning culture. And interestingly enough, I think the more that you mature as a professional, the more experience that you have, the more knowledge that you can kind of bring to that table. And so when I think about this in my earlier days, I would often think about, wait, let's get some training courses together. Let's run a management development program. Let's do some coaching. That's it. We've got a bit of a learning culture going, because actually to that business, that was probably something more than what they'd experienced in the past, whereby they probably just sent some people to some training courses, and actually that in itself isn't. But so for me, it's about creating this, a learning culture is about creating a work environment that really sort of promotes an environment of curiosity, where feedback, collaboration, experimentation are fundamentally some key bits. And if we've got time during this conversation, I'd love to talk about one of the acronyms where we think it's fundamental to a learning culture at Direct Line. If I was thinking about Direct Line as a business in terms of where I've come into, obviously the broader picture, we've been through sort of a series of operational change. We're very heavily sort of regulated as well. So there are external influences and our customers that kind of drive what that culture might look like because of the priorities as a business. And so when I think about that, I thought about actually, in terms of preparation for today, what that actually means. So I would probably say we're at the stage of sort of in build with lots of ideas, which kind of joins the consensus of what's been scored here. I often look at a maturity model that was done by Garvin, Edmondson and Gino. And that has a obviously a differentiation in terms of what they actually call those levels, but similar to that, that would be definitely sort of the capable and developing. And so this is where we kind of experience that learning initiatives are kind of in place. We're investing in that. Those are integrated into our processes and our systems and our technological infrastructure. And learning is at that stage probably viewed as a strategic asset to the business, so they can see value in terms of what learning brings, but doesn't necessarily see the potential of where it can actually go. And so what we've seen over the last couple of years is that definite shift in that actually we're growing and placing more emphasis on kind of like the knowledge, the sort of the sharing of collaboration. And I would say that there are often pockets where you start to can either drop down a level or back in, because again, some of those external or internal influences based on priorities could change where you are in terms of that learning culture. But for us at the moment, it actually is a really exciting place to be. We are dipping into, if we were looking at that model that I talked about, sort of the proficient and embedded, in which our colleagues are really sort of starting to feel empowered in terms of where they take ownership of their own development. Now, part of that is driven by one of our core values, which is own it, which is all about building accountability. I am definitely somebody who, particularly within my function and the people that report into me from a digital perspective, we're very much kind of, that's pivotal to what we do. Like, how can we take ownership of driving the learning culture? What is it that we actually need to be doing? What are the problems that we're trying to solve? What is the why? And that's often the counsel that I would give, is that what is your starting point? What is the journey that you want to go on? And then really look at kind of like leveraging that. So that hopefully gives you a little bit of insight to where we are as an organization. We're just in excess of around about 10,000 people. So it's a large organization. It's quite complex in terms of obviously the services and stuff that we offer. But obviously I've worked at the opposite end of the spectrum, a smaller type family run business, which has its own challenges, whether that's budget, but actually sometimes you think an organization of our side has a massive learning budget, and actually that's not always the case. For me, it's about how you spend that learning budget and what you get sign off for, which I know that we might come on to talking about that in terms of how you influence the powers that be in terms of getting that budgetary sign off.
Absolutely. And we will definitely come back to some of those elements. And I can see quite a number of questions rattling in. We'll come to those in a minute, guys. I just, one question I guess I wanted to ask you, Craig, specifically, is obviously the sector you operate in, is financial professional services, okay, and the ability to be shiny, let's say, and different and innovative, and and I'm not saying this is right, by the way, but often it can be interpreted that actually risk is highly managed in those types of organizations by the very virtue of what they do. So I guess the question I'd like to ask is how much stretch is there in an organization like Direct Line, to really impact the culture, versus that kind of blank piece of paper you were talking about earlier, because there will be people on this webinar who will be sat there thinking, okay, that's great, but my organization is super traditional. So talk us a little bit through that, because I know that you are very much kind of the ideas guy. So how do you navigate that, Craig?
I think it's actually part of a skill set which I've over the years learned to kind of go, if you can be creative, if you can be innovative, if you can have the influential, the ability to be influential, that's a way in which you can help foster a learning culture. So I know this actually might directly link to one of the questions I think that we've had from Mark Jones, which is around some of those strategies. And I think over the years, what I've really learned, and I've taken this into Direct Line, is actually leadership are those people that are kind of almost like help in terms of the accountability of driving that learning culture. So if you have, for instance, colleagues within our organization that don't feel as if they have the time or don't understand really the impact that they're going to have as a result of learning, then it falls kind of flat on its face, which again, whereas this acronym I want to talk to you about in a bit would be really, really useful to kind of give some essence around that. So I think for me, it's about, if you have any element of autonomy, then if you can take that accountability and that autonomy and tie them together, the world is your oyster, right? So often the stuff that I do within our organization, I've come in, and again, there hasn't been, these are the things that you must do over this period of time, and this is how you need to do them. It's been this is our strategy from an organization. These are our internal strategies from an L&D perspective that tie back into those business objectives, right? So those are your fundamental priorities as an organization. But actually, out with that, there is an element of a bandwidth where you can go, actually, as part of this, is there an opportunity for me to get out into the business and work with our stakeholders across the business to really understand their operation, really understand how us as a function can support them in terms of driving performance, helping them with skills and their careers. How do we actually do that? And I think fundamentally, one driver of that learning culture is to get out into the business. If you can get out into the business and really understand what's required, you can then kind of make sense of what are some of those priorities. And when we look at the priorities, we also then take it down another level and say, well, actually, if we work on this over here, how much effort versus how much impact are we actually going to have? Because obviously within any business, there's a nice to have versus needs to have, right? And what we found is that actually there are large volumes of the traditional that you talked about, right? So from a digital perspective, there's a lot which is the delivery is by a PowerPoint. The digital thing is policy learning, again, which could maybe have elevated from a PowerPoint to a PDF or a interactive type of e-learning. So I've kind of gone, well, actually, this is our opportunity to really get out into the business and experiment. And as soon as you start experimenting with fulfilling a need from within the organization, that's when you're going to start to increase that appetite. You're going to start to really kind of go, oh my gosh, this looks different. This looks like amazing. And sometimes actually what looks like as an amazing, wow, immersive experience is just something that's slightly different. You've approached it from a slightly different perspective. And I think that that's where sometimes that creativity and innovation will allow you to just kind of, you're in a safe environment to practice, and actually let's just see how that goes down. So what we've done is we've almost like worked out, by getting out into the business, who are some of those advocates for learning? Who has the appetite to kind of really change that push-pull dynamic? And then how can we market that? And so we've gone out into the business with just snippets of things we're working on, right, that might be in a prototype stage, and gone, here you go, what do you think? Like, this is very different. So they're now saying, oh my God, this is brilliant. How could we use this to drive a behavioral change in this particular area of the business? And that's a really exciting opportunity. So what we're doing now is we're whetting people's appetite. We're almost like showing off is what the art of the possible could be. And then as a result of that, what it's doing is ultimately it's changing this push-pull dynamic. And then I could talk more, but I obviously realize that I need to take a break for our listeners to kind of consume what I've just talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now would probably be a good time, because I see that the questions are kind of rattling in, that Craig and I maybe try and tackle a few of these. So one that's, and apologies if we miss you out, but Michael, I'll just read the question direct, if that's okay. And this is from Mark Jones. Are there any specific tools or technologies in your experience, in our experience, that support a thriving learning culture?
Okay, so I think this is where I introduce this acronym, right? So in the world of insurance, we live an acronym. Actually, in the world of L&D, we live an acronym, right? So one of the things that I've been 6 months at Direct Line is to try and be creative around what are some of maybe the key factors that actually drive a learning culture. So we've come up with a bit of a strap line that's called Getting Stacked for Learning, and actually STACKed is an acronym. And STACKed basically stands for skills, technology, attitude, careers, knowledge, experience, and development. And if I know at the beginning, Nathan, you talked about how 𝘂𝗿𝗿 is really representative of telling a story. And I've obviously been fortunate enough to work with 𝘂𝗿𝗿 in the past, and absolutely can say for anybody who has not, and this isn't a sales pitch, this is somebody that obviously has used your content, it does tell a story, and it tells a story in a very different way. And so I think by having an acronym like STACKed, you can actually build a story from it. You can change some of those not the abbreviation, but you can change the meaning behind some of them. So skills is all about, okay, so my starting point is, what are those skills that I need in order to do my job, in order to do my job well? Where does that link into performance? If I think about the skills that I need in terms of the future, what does that look like? And actually, you can put yourself in the shoes of you as an individual in terms of your growth and development, or you could then think about it from a people leader within the business. If you've got people for you, actually have a think about what this actually means to them. You've then got technology, right? So what's the infrastructure look like? Do people know where to go to in terms of having the right tech to support them in terms of their skills? What does that infrastructure look like in terms of your learning ecosystem? What does it look like in terms of, if you're responsible for L&D, is the technology or the software that you've invested in order to create these types of fantastic experiences, right, that people are going to remember, and it's going to help them in terms of the knowledge. So if you think about this as a story, right, okay, so let's just imagine I've worked out what the skills are. I now know the technology that's going to support me. I now know where to go to. I now know as an instructional designer what kind of content I can create based on the software that I have. But what happens now in terms of attitude? Right, so my attitude, you talked earlier about sort of growth mindset, right? What happens if I have this attitude whereby, oh, I just haven't got time for learning, like, I've got to squeeze it in somewhere. Again, that's a pivotal part of our learning culture. If you have the wrong attitude to that, is there any opportunity in which you can flick it, right? So it might be from, oh God, I can't commit to doing 4 to 5 minutes, but actually change that to, I can now do 5 minutes a week. Build it up, start off small, gradually build up. The other thing that's to do with attitude and mindset is about people leaders within the business. So you know how I talked about best practice was, how do you foster that learning culture? Leaders play a pivotal role in this. If they're not role modeling the behavior or giving you that insight, then what do you do? We then got careers. Yes, careers is in the middle. I think we just had that from Kay. So let's imagine we're telling us a story. We've got skills, technology, attitude, brilliant. What about my career? I don't know how many of you have there on the call have either had a conversation about what your career plan looks like, actually talked to your manager about it, actually just thought about it as yourself, that you clearly mapped out what those skills are, the technology that you're going to access to obviously get that, and having the right attitude in terms of your aspirations. Now, take into consideration, obviously, that there are people within our organizations that actually are quite happy doing what they want to do. What you've just got to keep an eye on there is performance, because as soon as somebody becomes quite complacent, that then changes. Think about how in your own careers, how they've changed in the last year, 5 years. How many of us can kind of go, actually, it has changed, but what I haven't done is mapped out the skills that I need in order to be at the forefront of that career. You've then got knowledge, right? So if you've got all those ducks in a row, think about the knowledge. How are you getting that knowledge? How, as an L&D function, are you supporting your organization in terms of resources, courses, all of that type of stuff? How do I gain that knowledge? But more importantly, how am I actually retaining it? Because again, this comes down to the next part of the puzzle, which is experience. If I've got a facilitator in my organization just cramming as much information into the delivery of a session, and it means nothing because by the end of that session, they've not learned anything. Or I'm shoving a PowerPoint or a PDF and expecting somebody to write. So this is where obviously sometimes the way in which we deliver that knowledge then is based onto the experience. So how are you making it immersive? So at the moment, there's lots of stuff around creating immersive experiences using some great tech that's out there, but obviously combining that also with content like your own 𝘂𝗿𝗿𝗿 and other vendors that are out there, just in terms of how can we create this great story that is going to make people remember, but we're going to make people walk, particularly at Direct Line, how to make people walk in the shoes of our customers, right? So we're doing some really great immersive stuff at the moment, which is tying into all of these things that we talked about. And then fundamentally, the last piece in the puzzle is development. So this all ties into your overall development. How many of you are actually having those conversations about linking your objectives and targets to the overall strategy, the strategy of your own, obviously, individual function. And that the whole emphasis around stacked is if you remove any of those elements, it all falls down, right? So if we can really focus on what all of those things mean as me as an individual, but also as an organization, I think all of those key factors will really help you drive your organizational learning culture, or at least a starting point, right? So yeah, so I had to get in that in there because I think it covers quite a lot in terms of best practice, fostering a learning culture. If they've got people on the call not sure where to start, there's 7 things there that you can look at and go, right, if I looked at each of these different things, are they kind of like solidly in place? Because those are some of the foundations to our success.
Yeah, and I guess just looking at the questions and chat within the webinar there, a lot of people are demanding that. So we will share with you that acronym and each of those stages. I can see that people have dropped it in, but yeah, we will absolutely do that because Craig's absolutely right, and I agree with him. Often people, and I use this phrase all the time in my business, and a lot of my colleagues will laugh when they hear me say it, but don't try and eat the elephant in one go. And what we're doing effectively there is we're breaking it down into manageable chunks. And that's your starting point. I think a key area for me quickly, and then we're going to jump to a poll. Craig and I can talk, so we want to make sure that we get in what we want to do, and then offer questions for you guys at the end. Yeah, one of the key things for me is don't solely focus on performance. I think because performance comes in different levels. Okay, performance comes from kind of leadership and monitoring of that performance, because that is important. But actually what it can do is it can cripple individuals in an organization. Performance means different things to different people. So think more about inputs as well as outcomes, rather than just purely outputs. And then the bit Craig was talking about there, totally agree with you, Craig, is that immersive piece and different forms. Not a plug for animated e-learning here at all, but there are loads of different modalities that are available to learners, audiences, organizations, that actually, when you bring the sum of those parts together as part of your learning culture, way more powerful as a collective than a single modality. So something that's real hot property and hot topic, within our business at the moment. We're talking about that for our own internal people. Right, okay, let's move through, shall we? So, Michael, if we could jump to the second poll, please, that would be really handy. Nice and simple, this one. And Craig touched on it earlier, and we're going to talk about this. So we understand the importance of exec buy-in. Okay, as a quick poll, who has a seat at the top table? we'll just let this run a little bit. Yeah, okay. Okay, interesting. We can see that it's sort of coming through. We'll let it run just a couple of moments longer, please, Michael, and then we'll close the book on that one if we can. Yeah, if we just do that, perfect. Okay. Right, so very interesting. Because this has been a hot topic for many a year, hasn't it? Around having that seat at the top table and having the ability to influence when it comes to things like budgets, when it comes to things like internal resources. So, I guess, how do you influence, Craig? How do you influence and how do you deploy and how do you get that seat at the top table? And then when you've got it, yeah, how do you make sure that you use it in the right way?
Yeah. Okay. So a number of different factors, really. One is be seen to be heard. Okay. Particularly in an organization that's quite large. You are just one part of the overall jigsaw puzzle, right? So one of the things is around marketing. So marketing allows us to essentially take accountability for driving what we want people to hear, right? So whether that is we're sharing information about recommended content. We are telling stories about, behavioral change or promotion that's a result of learning that somebody has undertaken. We are thinking about content campaigns ahead. So we've just done, I think, Join Hands January, Focus February. We're on Mindful March at the moment, and that's really sort of driving some of that content to really start to make people feel that they know there's presence there, because I think there's a perception that maybe L&D doesn't exist or L&D are order takers. So you have to be upfront, in front of the business to drive perception, right? Which helps personal brand of the actual L&D team individuals, but also as a wider collective, you're really showing presence. And I think that helps, because going from who's L&D to, oh, L&D are the people that keep posting about courses, or they're interviewing people, and the difference it's making within their organizations is brilliant. So marketing is one thing. I think that helps them with the top-down perception, looking at opportunities where you can get into the business and deliver that. So whether that is lunch and learns, whether you're doing road shows. We did some HR connection days recently, where we've obviously got members of the HR leadership team and exec that are on that, because they're going to also be influential at the top table in terms of driving what you're doing within the context of L&D across your organization. I think data is critical. So if somebody said to me a couple of years ago about data and marketing, I was like, that's somebody else's job. Now we have to take accountability for driving data and marketing within a business. And data actually is really crucial, and not only in terms of how we measure and evaluate impact, but it also helps you going back to that storytelling. So if you can go out and say, this was the starting point, this is what we intended to do, these were the learning outcomes, this was the impact that we wanted to see, and this is where we're up to now, and this is where we foresee it in the future. That tells a really good story. And so if you can use data to take the people at the top of the table or across the business, actually, because again, if you market what you're doing and the impact it's having, that will change that push-pull dynamic. People will become curious and go, actually, you're doing this over here with Green Flag, we'd love something similar over here. Can you? And you get to the point where you've gone, L&D sometimes feels non-existent, to now people are knocking at the door and you've got them queuing up and you don't know where to start, right? Which is a really great challenge for people to have in organizations, which is, let's try and utilize that data to tell a really, really good story. So I think data would do that. And just where you can get sponsorship, where you can actually get people at the top table to experience what you're doing. So just last week, we shared a snippet of a course where people could actually go in and have a go themselves. It was one of our immersive experiences using a new piece of tech. And the feedback that we had online was we didn't have to go out and ask for testimonials because people were saying, oh my God, we love this. This is so different to what we used to. And hopefully they'll do that marketing for you. So hopefully that answers some of those questions in terms of some of the things that may help influence at that top table. But yeah, if you can utilize data, do a great business case, top-down perceptional change, see that ROI, tell a really good story, get them to experience it, use that role model behavior, then I think that will help.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that 100% from top down. Internally in IAM, when I think about majority of leaders in IAM, whether that is leading, a small team or whether that is, leading the entire business, and we're an organization of about 50 employees. Top-down buy-in and demonstrating that is key, because why wouldn't you as a leader? Okay.
I should say on that before you move on, Nathan, as well. I think one of the things that I was reading recently was Donald Taylor's L&D Global Sentiment Survey, and that talked about, I think it was 67% of L&D professionals believe that executive buy-in is crucial for obviously successful learning initiatives to happen within the organization. I think there was a Harvard Business Review as well recently that talked about a similar type of thing, and actually the return there was, I think, 24% higher profit margin than those that actually don't invest in terms of getting that exec buy-in. So a couple of good things there. I think Michael on Q has just shared that sentiment survey link as well, if nobody's seen it.
Thank you, Michael. Right, okay. So one more poll. How are we doing for time, Michael? Just time check very quickly.
We are on 13:42, so we have about 5 or 6 minutes to remain, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. So final poll, please, Michael, if we can, and then we'll start to wrap up around that. Okay, so poll 3. What would you say is your biggest challenge in building a learning culture in your organization? Now, we've kind of covered lots of areas of these, and we've given snippets, I think, as we've talked through. But yeah, if you can just have a read through that and punch your answers in. Lack of technology, lack of resource, no senior buy-in, just been talking about that. Time affects different organizations in different ways. Budgets, thank you, Sam. Can I select all? So yeah, if we just run that for another few seconds, and then we'll close that, please, Michael, and then we'll have a little chat around that.
Yeah. So it's some interesting results, isn't there? Time, right? We get that one all the time. No pun intended there. And budget. Time and budgets normally come in quite high, I would say. I don't know whether you probably hear that, don't you, with your eLearning clients, that they're probably two of the highest challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, time and budget is key, time and time again, and it's actually worse in certain industries than others from what we see. So if your audience, the end user of whether that be content or whether that be that learning culture we were talking about more broadly earlier, if you're in a busy, chaotic role, contact center, think retail organization, then you are short of time. You are. So thinking about that, coming back to your point, Craig, considering how you're going to market the learning, how you're going to deliver it. Okay, so your modalities, the content that you're going to pull together, thinking about where they're going to consume that, accessibility, critical, key. One of the things that we've introduced internally, but also externally to our clients is a campaign that we're running for the entirety of this year, which plays on different key dates and different key themes in the calendar year, and actually provides free resources to our colleagues internally, and helps them build a learning culture and develop themselves. But also that's accessible to our clients as well, or customers. So I think we've got something, Michael, actually, that we could drop in to the link later, which is a link to some of those resources, which are really, really useful. But that kind of gives you, I guess, an example of some of the culture in the IM business and of how we structure that. Thank you, Michael. By all means, take a look at it. But that is a year-long piece, and we kind of mirror that to different key events in the year. But what are you seeing finally, Craig, and just conscious of time, what are you seeing finally in relation to that in Direct Line at the moment?
So there's lots of things, right? So budget for me is interesting because obviously work small and large. I think it depends on how you spend your budget. So for me, it was about getting out there, and actually there is so much. It's like a kid in a sweet shop, right? There is so much stuff that's out there at the moment, and there's so much accessibility where you can just go and have a play. I would say if you can dedicate some time to just going and see if it's out there, even if it's out of reach, right? Sometimes to experience that yourself gives you those ideas, gives you that creativity, allows you to come up with certain prototypes. We've just essentially from my budget, I've just reinvested that budget. I've chosen to spend it in a different way, and that's because I found stuff that's in the market that it actually does what I need it to do at a fraction of the price of some of those big household names that are out there, particularly in the L&D market. So I'd really kind of like counsel you to kind of just go and explore. It might not be for now, but if you're thinking about strategically where you need to go to, if you want to reach out and talk to her about some of those things, that's absolutely fine. Time is always of the essence, right? And I think this comes back to that storytelling is how do you create the appetite for it? What's in it for me, right? So I think there was some conversations around it's not just the senior leaders in the business, it's other people, right? You have just got to create these diverse learning and career opportunities. So if you can create this environment of curiosity where it's combined of formal, informal, virtual, face-to-face, digital, you go micro learning stuff, some longer stuff, so you can do just in time type of content versus I want a deeper dive type content. If you can create those campaigns, I think the more that you can offer, the more that somebody will just go. It's a bit like when you're advertising, right, on the telly, or you used to get the old junk mail through the letterbox, right? You know, 1 in 10 things that come past your face should be like, oh, that sounds quite interesting, and have a look at that. And I think that that's part of it. And I think if you do the diverse learning and career opportunities piece, so you create that environment of curiosity, which allows you to become more versatile, that will also tap into your multi-generational workforce, right? So if you've got a population that's made up of so many different types of people from different demographics, that will allow you to tap into what those preferences are in terms of what makes them think, well, actually, this is for me. I also think that storytelling in terms of getting out there and shouting about, hey, we did this over here, look at it, look at the impact that it's had, actually tells a really good story. And if you can get those advocates within your business to help you drive that marketing message, that will really help as well. So hopefully that's kind of tied up. We brought in there a bit about the multi-generational stuff into that conversation as well.
Great. Right. Thank you very much. Lots of great comments there in the chat. A mix really of, yeah, we're doing this, a mix of I guess a little bit of frustration there, and asking more of senior management and exec to deliver and back up on promises earlier made. So great, and thank you very much. Final point from me, and then any kind of further questions we'll offer up, and then we'll look to close the webinar. Is I think when I think back to a lot of what you've said there, Craig, and a lot of the chats we've had in the run up to this, but also what I've seen works in organizations. There's 3 or 4 key points for me, okay, which is, and you've spoken about these, Craig, today, is know your audience, absolutely 100%, okay. Market and tell that story within the business on different levels. Get buy-in, and it's not just about exec buy-in, top down. It's about buy-in for your audience as well as the exec. We all know the exec are the ones with the budget, but actually, if you're not getting an uptake of content, then there's no landing of that. Yeah, and then I guess the final one for me is don't be afraid to take a risk, right? Don't be afraid to try something, because if you don't try, then you'll never know.
Yeah.
Right.
That last one's quite interesting, by the way, because I work in insurance, and sometimes, you know, stereotypes of working in insurance is that we're very risk averse. So I don't like fit into that mold. But essentially, that's why I think you just have to like take a risk sometimes. I know there's been some chat about certain sectors that may work in, but try and pull something together for people to actually kind of visually see what that experience might look like. So you don't put in too much effort, but if you can demonstrate something and tell a really good story about the impact that this is likely to have, if you can cross collaborate as well, right? So if you can pick out a couple of SMEs to work with something on you, so you really kind of bring something to life in a very small manner, then yeah, please take those risks. And actually, that you're the influencers of change here. If you don't do it, who is going to do it? And I think, you know, you will get knockbacks like we all do in life, right? But what do you do when you get a knockback? You kind of either go, I'm going to give up, or you just keep going back and you keep going back with something different and something different until sometimes it is right timing, right place.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you, Craig, and thank you to our audience. That's been a fantastic 52 minutes of chat. So I think when we practiced this, Craig, it was about 2 hours, wasn't it?
We didn't practice at all. What you on about? You got me completely on the spot.
No, that's been a great 52 minutes there, and yeah, thank you very much for your interaction. And we shall leave those resources in the chat. If anyone wants to reach out direct and learn a little bit more about the stacked model that Craig had mentioned, or actually wants to delve a little bit more into how we're deploying the free resources in our own business as well as our clients' businesses, then feel free to message either myself or Craig, and yeah, more than happy to have a conversation with you. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, both Nathan and Craig. And I can see already there's lots of people that looks like they're going to be reaching out to you or have connected with either or both of you via LinkedIn. So I think you're going to expect some messages when you log off this session. It just leaves me to say, on behalf of myself and everybody here at the LPI, thank you both to Nathan and Craig for sharing your stories and also, importantly, the impacts that you're making within your organisation. And can I also just say thank you to everyone that's been on the call, because the chat has been going completely bonkers with questions coming in and people sharing thoughts and ideas with each other. So thank you very much indeed. That's always really interesting and exciting to see people sharing your stories with each other. So thank you very much indeed. I am just going to stop the recording now.